You all know him. But as a matter of prudence, I need to introduce him. Mr. C.A. Vijay Narayan Keval Ramani is a chartered accountant by profession. He's into practice since last 26 years. With chartered accountant, his additional qualifications are his BCom, LLB, LLM, his MBA Finance too. He has also pursued his CMA from Australia, diploma in IFR in UK. He has also obtained a certification in the forensic accounting. Presently, he is practicing in the field of direct taxes appellate and fraud investigations, apart from the routine practice of chartered accountancy. He has also delivered lectures and presented papers at various professionals and other forums, including Rotary Club of a wide range of topics like fraud investigations, limited liability partnerships, cyber crimes, budget, black money, income tax, to name a few. He also provides training to the government auditors through the Indian Audit and Accounts Board on topics like risk management, fraud detections. He has been invited to train government supreme auditors of Afghanistan on fraud detections. This is very important considering the current situation. He is author of a book published by AIFTI, Tax Practitioners Western Zone, titled as Limited Liability Partnerships Simplified Through Frequently Asked Questions. He has also written various articles in various professional magazines on the limited liability partnerships. He has also been contributor to the field, to the background material to the Executive Master's Program in New Age Auditor of a Central of Audit Quality of ICAI for the topic Assurance and Review Engagements. He has also been invited by ICAI Corporate Laws and Corporate Governance Committee to be part of group to work on the requirement for rationalizing, reducing and simplifying the related process related to the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. He has also been involved in various professional and other associations at various levels, such as President of Tax Friends of All India Association of Sindhi Tax Practitioners, including CAS Advocates for 2016 to 18 and 18 to 20. He was also president of Tax Practitioner Association Thane for 18 to 20. He is also steering committee member of ICMA Australia India chapter. Along with this, as a social, he is also managing trustee of Sahiti Panchayat Mumbai since 2017. President of American Institute of Sindhology India chapter. President of Rotary Club Thane Royals in 1819, and also been designated to the district treasurer for 22-23 in the Rotary District 3142. He is also taken as an honorable member on 3 international Rotary clubs in various countries. With this brief introduction, I present to you CA Vijay Kamal Ramani on a virtual board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Snehal.
So that is yours.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you, Snehal ji, for the invite. Friends, आवाज आ रहा है अभी?
अभी आएगा.
Friends, today we will be dealing with a topic. Yes, as Girish said, the amendments have come just recently, and everybody is interested in trying to understand the amendments. But the amendments were hardly 50 amendments. So to give those amendments, we didn't need 2 hours of time. So what we decided, and as I discussed with Girish, I would initially be discussing a brief about the LLP Act, the rules, what LLP is and how it can be helpful as a business, because normally it is seen that LLP is not yet looked into as a medium of business, because we still, whenever a client comes, we give them an option of a company. Yes, recently after the Companies Act 2013, people have started shifting to LLP, but yes, still noted that many people are not going. So I will just be briefing through the LLP Act and how it is helpful as a business model, and then I will go through the amendments. There are hardly 50 amendments, but yes, some are very important, and we'll be looking into the details. So I'll start with my LLP presentation first. Is the screen visible, Girish bhai?
Yes, bhai, yes.
So friends, LLP we will try to understand as a new age business model. We start with into the insights. Uh, LLP actually was started to bring in the benefits of both a limited partnership as well as a company, because there were many issues in partnership. There are many issues of ownership, unlimited liability, and many a times it is not acceptable to many banking and for loans and all that. Company, as we all know, it is a well accepted mode of doing business, but still the procedures are very tough. There are many complications, and many a times it becomes difficult for a layman to look into and follow the Companies Act procedures. So it was thought to bring a midway, and that is how LLP Act came into being, which basically brought in the features of both. If you look into the LLP Act, it is initially it was just about 81 sections, and now with this amendment, that is the very first amendment that has come after the LLP Act was introduced. They have introduced 7 new sections and deleted 3 sections, 4 sections. So now it is come to around 84 sections. From 81, they have increased to 84 sections in this act. But it's a very small act, very simple act. It is very understandable. So they have tried to simplify and encourage people, and they have tried to give the benefits of both. How it is given, we'll just look into it. As I said, it was enacted in 2008 after various committees were formed, discussions were held. Naresh Chandra committee gave a suggestion that should be for professionals. Then the business fraternity said, why should we be left behind? Then the JJ Irani committee was formed. They suggested that yes, everybody can be brought under the purview, and so this bill was presented to the parliament. And 9th of January 2009, LLP Act 2008 was passed. And then the rules were notified on 1st of April 2009. This is from where the act came into being, literally, that from 1st of April 2009, the LLP Act came into being. We try to understand the salient features of the act. It gives you, friends, benefits of both company and partnership. As I said in the beginning itself, it gives you the benefits of both. We'll see how it gives point to point. We'll be looking into it. It gives you a separate legal identity, as in you get in a company. Partnership, there were certain issues with the legal identity. Now in a LLP, you get a legal identity because LLP has been defined as a corporate. More so in the recent amendment, they have highlighted the fact that LLP is a corporate entity. Then you have a perpetual succession, which again was a problem in the partnership, that if there were 2 partners and 1 partner died, then the partnership had to be dissolved. In the LLP Act, they have taken care of this. We'll be looking into all these points in detail. Another benefit that they have given is the limited liability, which again in the partnership there was a problem. Anything happens, all the partners were held to be liable unlimited. Although it was a mistake of 1 partner, everybody was held to be liable unlimited. The partnership was held to be liable unlimited. Here the partnership as well as the remaining partners who have not committed the default, at least their liability is restricted to the limited to their capital involvement, and only the partner, if at all somebody is involved in the misadventure, only his liability will remain unlimited. You have to have minimum of 2 partners, that's okay. And then at least 1 Indian resident mandatory. Friend, this was first time brought in Indian corporate law that 1 Indian resident was made mandatory, because in those days, if you remember, in 2007 and all, there were a lot of issues of vanishing companies. To take care of that, there was no such provision in the 56 Companies Act. So they brought it in the LLP Act, and subsequently it was also enacted in the Companies Act 2013. But first time in the corporate history, Indian corporate laws, this term was incorporated that any one of the partners has to be an Indian resident. And then in a partnership, as we all know, in a normal partnership, we have a limit of 20 members, or in a banking company, we have a limit of 10 members, 10 partners. In a LLP, you can have unlimited number of partners. There is no maximum limit. Then individuals, LLPs and companies can be partners. So individuals and body corporates, basically you can say they can be partners. Concept of designated partners was introduced. Friends, this designated partner we look into in some time, but actually it is many a times confused with that of a director. But there is a lot of difference between the role of a designated partner and a director. And I can assure you, if you inform your client about the actual role and responsibilities of a designated partner, nobody would like to become a designated partner. Vis-a-vis, in case of a company, everybody likes to rush to become a director, but here nobody would like to become a designated partner. But yes, this concept was introduced for the first time, and this has separated uh, the responsibilities from the management. Then all the partners will be agents of the LLP only and not each other. Unlike in a partnership where the partners were not only held to be agents of the partnership firm but also agents of each other. But here they have made this change that partners to be only agents of the LLP and not each other. And then going with this perpetual succession, you have a time of 6 months to admit a new partner in case the number of partners go below 2. So if there are only 2 and unfortunately one dies, so the other remaining partner, instead of dissolving the LLP, he has a time till 6 months to get in a new partner. So you have a perpetual succession. The business can continue as a regular business. Then audit of accounts is mandatory only if the turnover exceeds 40 lakhs and capital exceeds 25 lakhs. We will look into it. And these are the only figures based on which now they have introduced in the amendment a new concept of a small LLP. It has been defined that a small LLP is an LLP which has a turnover of up to 40 lakhs and or a capital up to 25 lakhs. But they have added that the government can notify that this 40 lakhs turnover can go up to 250 crores. And the capital can go up to 5 crores. So it can be notified by the government. But as of now, the small LLP definition that has been introduced in the 21 Act, Amendment Act, is that a small LLP will be an LLP which has a turnover up to 40 lakhs and the capital exceeding 25, not exceeding 25 lakhs. We'll look into it as we see into the amendments later. So now we look into each and every aspect of the LLP, having seen the salient features. We'll look into each and every aspect of the LLP, how it goes about. First, you would go through the partners. So minimum 2 partners, as we have already seen. At least one Indian resident is mandatory. Earlier, the definition of an Indian resident said that the Indian resident is one who in the previous year, preceding year, was in India for 182 days or more. But now in the 21 Amendment Act, they have made an amendment to this definition also. So now as per the new amendment, Indian resident is a resident who in the current financial year stays in India for more than 122 days. Instead of 182 days in the previous year, 120 days in the current financial year. That is the amendment that is got in the LLP Act. There is no limit on the maximum number of partners. Now it is important to understand who can become a partner. So as I said earlier also, an individual or a body corporate. And a body corporate would include companies or LLPs. Companies would include foreign companies, LLP would include foreign LLPs because they are also body corporates as defined under the Companies Act 2013, also defined under the LLP Act, giving reference to the Companies Act definition. So basically, if we can understand from this that a minor technically cannot become a partner because an individual who is eligible to contract can only become a partner in LLP. HUF cannot become a partner. A trust cannot become a partner, unlike we used to do in the partnership under the Partnership Act. But here they cannot become. So only individuals and body corporates. Now, who cannot become a partner? Let us try and understand the disqualifications also. A person who is of unsound mind, a person who has been declared as insolvent, a person who has even applied for the insolvency, not only declared insolvent, but if you have just applied for the insolvency also, you are not eligible to become a partner. Now we'll try to understand the differences between partners in a LLP Act vis-a-vis the shareholders in a company. We will try to analyze the difference also. So in both you need minimum 2 partners or shareholders, except for a limited company where you need minimum 7 shareholders. In a normal private limited company, you need 2 shareholders. In a LLP, you need only 2 partners. At least one Indian resident mandatory now, that is common in both the acts 2013. After the amendment in the 2013 act, it is common in both the acts. Then the limit on maximum numbers, LLP, as you have seen, there is no limit. In a private limited company, you have a limit of 200 members. Earlier, it used to be 50 in the 56 Act, but now it is 200 members, and there is no maximum limit in the limited company, public limited company. Then, as we saw, who can become partners? LLP, it is very restricted. An individual or a body corporate. Shareholders, as you know, AOPs can become, trusts can become, and HUFs can become shareholders. There are a lot many other things who can become, but in a LLP, it is very restricted to individuals and body corporates. This is important, friends, to understand what is the role of partner vis-a-vis a role of a shareholder in the company. A shareholder, friends, as we all know in a company, their role is basically to appoint the directors in the AGM, to approve the dividend and finalize the approve the dividend. That's all. And basically any major amendment, if it requires the shareholders approval, that is the role of the shareholders. Whereas the partners in the LLP, they are de facto managers. As I told you earlier also, that designated partners by default does not become managers, administrative role. In a company, you have directors who have an administrative role who manage the company. Here, all the partners are supposed to manage the company, except if it is stated clearly in the agreement, LLP agreement, that the partners cannot do, or some of the partners will be managing. Otherwise, by default, all the partners become administrative and managing partners. Now we try and understand the role of a designated partner. Again, I would like to repeat, designated partner is not a partner as you have seen. That is not like a director. He doesn't have a managerial role by default. They have only responsibilities, as we look into it. You have to have a minimum 2 designated partners. At least one of the designated partner has to be an Indian resident. Why? Because of these vanishing companies, so the government has thought that whom to catch hold of. So it has made it mandatory that one of the designated partner has to be an Indian resident. So God forbid, if something happens, they should be able to catch hold of him and make him accountable. And who can become a designated partner? Only individuals, because this is a role which you need to apply your mind, and so individuals can become. And if you have a partner which is a body corporate like a LLP or a company, they can nominate anyone from their company or their institution to become a designated partner. So ultimately it has to be an individual, either directly an individual who is a partner or an individual who is nominated by a body corporate partner. Then what are the duties? Mind you, friends, again I am saying, designated partners by default only have duties. They have no rights. Designated partners are required to discharge all obligations or compliances as required under the LLP Act. This is the onus put on the designated partners to ensure that all the obligations or compliances as required under the LLP Act are discharged. They are personally liable for all the penalties levied on LLP for contravention of provisions. And mind you, friends, the penalties are as low as 2,000 rupees and as high as 5 lakh rupees. And even in this Amendment Act, where they have reduced some of the penalties, but still some of the penalties relating to designated partners go as high as 5 lakh rupees. Some penalties which were 10,000 rupees have been reduced to 2,000 rupees. So you can say now that the minimum fine or penalty can be 2,000 rupees, going up to a maximum of 5 lakh rupees. So you can see that designated partner is only entrusted with the obligation to ensure that all obligations and compliances under the LLP Act are done. or even now under the Income Tax Act, they are liable to file the returns, otherwise they will be held liable. And if they don't do it, then you have only penalties for contravention. That is what I said, that if you genuinely tell somebody that this is your responsibility, nobody would personally like to become a designated partner because it doesn't have a cream by default. Now we will try to understand the role differences between a designated partner and a director. So roles played, as I said, directors play a managerial role. They administer the company, they manage the whole company, they take the decisions, they have a decision-making role, whereas designated partners by default do not have a decision-making role. All the partners have an administration role, all the partners have a decision-making role. Until the agreement states that only X, Y, Z partner will have a decision-making role and that X, Y, Z may be designated partner. So until it specifies, by default, it does not have. Duties and liabilities, practically you can see it is the same because even the directors are liable to ensure that all the compliances under the Companies Act are done. Same is that the designated partners are held liable that all the compliances under the LLP Act are done. Limited liability partnership, then we go to the contribution or the capital that we say. So contribution is nothing but the share capital that we have in case of a company. Contribution can be in tangible or intangible form. So you can bring in cash, you can bring in property, movable or immovable, or you can bring it in intangible form. That is, some copyrights can be coming. You can bring in your services. If you are able to value your services, that can also come in as a capital. So there are lot many things, like supposing in a CA firm, we have many articles who are doing good and they clear very fast and we know that they are deserving people. So we would like to include them as partners in our firm. So many a times we tell them, you please join us. We wish you to continue working with us. And they say, sir, I don't have money. What would I do? So that time you can decide that, okay, his next 3 years remuneration, 50% of that has to be valued and converted into his capital. That would be his capital contribution. That can be done. So this is one of the ways you can bring in a capital contribution. The nature and the value of contribution has to be stated in the account. So every time you prepare a balance sheet, you have to state that the contributions have come in whether in cash or by tangible or intangible other contribution. Now this similar amendment has been brought in the Companies Act 2013 also, which was not there earlier in the 1956 Act. So if you read Schedule 2, you will find that a similar amendment is there, and now even in the balance sheet of a company, you have to report that. In case of non-cash contributions, those non-cash contributions may be property, movable, immovable, or intangible asset, has to be valued by either a practicing chartered accountant or a cost accountant or a valuer from approved panel. So any of these three, you can obtain a valuation report and give it. Then no reserve account is to be maintained. Although this is a dichotomy in the LLP Act, the LLP Act says no reserve has to be maintained. Whereas if you look in form number 8, which we filed for the accounts, it says that it asks you specifically for the reserves that you have in the LLP. I don't know what logic they apply, but still the Act says no reserve has to be maintained. Then partners can grant loan to the LLP. Now they have brought in a new concept. Non-convertible debentures would also be allowed to be issued by the LLP. Just a definition has been brought in the Amendment Act that non-convertible debentures are debentures which are issued against certain assets, charged against the assets. Details are to be followed, but now they have just started the concept, and now even the LLP will be able to issue non-convertible debentures. We'll look into it when we look into the amendment. Now we come to the most important part of the limited liability partnership, that is the agreement. Unlike that we see in your company, we have a articles of association, memorandum of association, which define the objects and the rules and all that. In LLP, there's a agreement. An agreement, my friends, It is the most flexible document that you can ever imagine under this thing. You can put in anything, you can visualize anything which is legal in the agreement. There is no preset rule, there are no preset conditions that you have to take care of. Yes, there are certain things that if you miss certain things in the agreement, the act says that these points, if you miss in the agreement, then they have brought in the first schedule. It says that if these points, some points are there, if these points are missing in your agreement, then the first schedule will apply. But yes, if you take care of those points also in your agreement, then your agreement will prevail. Because if the first schedule says that the partners have to have equal ratio, if it is not defined in the agreement, and if you want to define a non-equal ratio, you can define in the agreement. So the agreement will ultimately prevail. Now we look into the first schedule also. Let us go into the agreement. So LLP agreement has been defined by 210. It says LLP agreement means any return agreement. Please take note, friends. It's a return agreement between the partners of the LLP or between the LLP partnership and its partners, which determines the mutual rights and duties of the partners and their rights and duties in relation to that LLP. Friends, please note why I am harping on this return agreement. If you read first schedule, it says that in case you have no agreement or if your agreement is silent on certain points. So this is a dichotomy in the act itself, where the agreement says, the definition says that agreement has to be a written agreement, whereas the first schedule allows you to be it to be a oral agreement. Again, if you go through the history of form number 3 that we have been filing at the time of incorporation, initially they used to allow that if you do not have an agreement, it's okay. You just define the main point. Then they said you should have an agreement. Then they ensured on the stamping of that agreement. So it has evolved over a period. So now technically a written agreement is a must. You have to have it, otherwise they will not allow you to form the LLP. LLP agreement can be executed before or after the incorporation of LLP. Unlike in a company, the articles and memorandums have to be signed before the incorporation. Here you can sign the agreement after the incorporation, and it is always advisable that you sign after the incorporation. In the absence of the agreement, the provisions of first schedule apply. But in the absence of agreement means in the absence of certain clause applicable in the first schedule, also in the agreement, the provisions of first schedule shall apply. And then if the agreement is signed prior to incorporation, it needs to be ratified. So that's what I said, friends. You better make an agreement, keep it ready. Once you get the incorporation certificate, form number 16, subsequently you sign and send it. Immediately you can file form number 3. If you keep it pending, if you sign it prior, then after the incorporation certificate received, you have to call a meeting of the partners, get it ratified, and then only you will be able to file. So it will delay your process. So it is always advisable that you have a draft agreement ready. Don't sign it. Get your incorporation certificate and then sign and submit. Now we look into the features of the first schedule. The first schedule says that in case your agreement is silent, now where will the first schedule apply? Now that, as I said, that agreement return is mandatory, so it will apply where your agreement is silent on any of these points. At that time, the first schedule will apply. That if your partnership LLP agreement does not state anything about the capital or the profits or losses, how the capital will be bringing in which share, how the profits or losses will be shared. If you don't want this to happen, you please mention in your agreement what would be the capital, how it would be brought in. You can have different ratios for capital, you can have different ratios for profits, you can have different ratios for losses. So it is not necessary that it has to be in the same ratio. You can define that way also in the agreement. Then an indemnity clause. Again, see, friends, which I was harping during the partnership. By default, all the partners are entitled to take part in the management decision making. But if you don't want certain partners to take part, you will have to mention in the agreement. It doesn't become that designated partners by default become the partners who take part in the management. You have to mention who all will take part in the management and who all will not be eligible. You want to segregate management roles for partners. By default, if you don't have an agreement, don't have this clause in your agreement, so no partner will be technically entitled to remuneration. So if you have to have a remuneration, please put it in your agreement. No new partner can be introduced without the consent of all partners. All the decisions with the majority of partners. Then minutes have to be recorded within 30 days and all the decisions recorded. So in case so friends, I am just repeating for the sake of repetition. In case you want to avoid any of the clauses, it is always advisable that you mention all these clauses in your agreement. Render true account, non-compete clause, partners cannot be excelled by majority unless prior agreed, and the disputes to be referred to the Arbitration and Reconciliation Act 1986. So they go by default. If you want anything to be done, please mention it in your agreement. We'll also be looking into the salient features of what a normal agreement should be. These are the salient features. Now, as we are professionals, I would not be going into the recitals, agreement, LLP agreement signed between so and so and so and so. I would just be highlighting the bullet points, what you should ensure that they should be there in the agreement, which is very important to understand. First and foremost is the objects. Now, objects, friends, I would like to give you some safeguard over here. Normally, what we are used to when we file the form SPICE, that is FFI LLP form that we file for the name approval, we put in the objects which are restricted to 500 characters. So, when you get the name approval and when you go in for the incorporation or when you submit the agreement, those are the objects which will be automatically picked up. So please ensure that your LLP agreement contains only those objects. Don't put anything extra because that can create a confusion and they would not be valid because you are not submitted to the ROC at the time of incorporation or subsequent amendment. And moreover, in the objects, please ensure that it is specific to the point we are used in a partnership to write or any other matter, any other object as may be decided mutually by the partners. That is not allowed. Please take care. You be specific what objects you want to bring in. In the registered address, you can also put in a commercial address, correspondence address as it is called in the act. You have to fill in a separate form 12, and intimate, and then you can have a separate correspondence address which can be different from the registered address. Then you have to put in the contribution or the capital, how the contribution is coming, the mode of the contribution, that is whether it is cash or whether it is by property, intangible asset or services, and the mode of valuation, please put in there. Then how the changes in contribution will happen. Friend, this is the one of the biggest advantage that you have in this vis-a-vis a company. In a company, if you have to ensure that I need to increase the capital or I need to reduce the capital, you have to go to the ROC for increase, fill in certain forms, get the approval, then issue rights and get it. Then there's a procedure for issuing rights. In case you have a reduction in capital, again you have to take a NCLT approval, take the creditor approval, and so on and so forth. This is very simple in a LLP. Just mention the procedure in the LLP agreement. Just you have to pass a resolution based on the procedure and file form number 3 with ROC. That is all as simple as that. You can increase the contribution, you can reduce the contribution. Once you reduce and that form number 3 is approved by the ROC, you can immediately withdraw the amount. So there is not much of a procedure, very simple. Within 1 month, you can either increase the contribution or reduce the contribution. It's such a simple process. Then you need to mention your sharing of your profits or losses, whether it has to be same, different, equal as you want. Then you please mention if at all you want to give remuneration to the partners. Here again, please don't put in remuneration will be as per section 48 of the Income Tax Act. Please quantify. Income Tax Act has sufficient safeguards to avoid double taxation in case of non-allowability of a remuneration in a firm. So please quantify. Otherwise, there can be a problem while assessment also. Then please specify who are the designated partners which you have to, and then their rights and obligations. Obligations, anyhow, you know some that they have to fulfill the compliances. but you can give them the rights also that if they are wrongly implicated or whatever it is, they should be indemnified. They have a right to claim damages, and also you can put it. But by default, as I said, it is not there, but still it is up to the partners to decide and put it in the agreement whether they will have any additional rights. Then the rights and obligations of the partners, which, as I said, by default, all the partners have a management role. But then you can restrict, you can say that XYZ out of 6 would be managerial role. ABC may not be having a managerial role. Many a times, friends, you can have different obligations for different partners, different rights for different partners. Like supposing we have a financing partner who is only financing a say building project, so he would be interested in safeguarding his project. So it can be very clear that he may not become designated partner, he may not become managing partner. He will say, I am not interested. So you can write that ABC may be managing partner who will manage the business. But if any decision is taking relating to the project or the property of the project, that is a building or land, then he will be involved. So you can give different rights also, differential rights also. So selected rights can be given to selected persons. You can define that very much clearly in the agreement. No issues on that. This is one of the best features in the LLP agreement, that it is a very flexible document. Then you can define the procedure for admission, retirement, expulsion, or death of a partner. Whether you would like the legal heir to come in, whether you would not like the legal heir to come in. What will be the procedure to bring in a new partner in case the partnership goes below 2 partners and only 1 partner remain at the end. So what would be the procedure? Within that 6 months period, you have to bring in a new partner. So whether you would like to dissolve the LLP, wind up the LLP, or whether you would like to continue and a new partner will introduce, you can define everything under this agreement. Our partner would be expelled by majority, simple majority, 2/3 majority, 3/4 majority, or 100%. That you have to decide. Then LLP also allows you to assign the financial interest, which you could not do in a partnership. Like we mortgage our shares in case of a company, we have shares and for financial thing. You can assign your financial interest. The only thing that is different over here is that once you assign the financial interest, the assignee can only have a right on the profits that you are earning. He can verify the account, but he cannot take part in the day-to-day management. That will still remain with the original partner, the assigner. That the management rights are not transferred, only the financial interest is assigned. Please take note on that. Then you can define the procedures for your minutes and meetings. LLP Act has not defined anything, unlike in your Companies Act 2013, it is defined that board meetings have to be held, AGM has to be held, and so on and so forth. LLP Act doesn't define any preset schedule. There are no format for minutes, but then you can define how the meetings will be held. The Companies Act defines the procedure, how a notice to be issued, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, depending on the nature of meeting. So here you can define how the notice will be issued, who will issue a notice, how many days prior, what is the quorum, minimum quorum, and so on and so forth. Meeting place through video conferencing, not through video conferencing. And then how the minutes will be maintained. The LLP Act says by default within 30 days it should be maintained, as we saw in the first schedule. But in case you want to have a different schedule, you please do it. You can do that also. Then if you need to have loans from partners, please define the procedures. How do you take a loan from partners or any other party? Unlike in a Companies Act, there is no restriction in a LLP for taking loans from outsiders. In the Companies Act, you have certain procedures and those acceptance of deposit rules and all that. Here, there are no such rules. It is open. You can take loans from any party from outside. And yes, now, as I told you earlier, they are also bringing in a concept of non-convertible debentures, so which would be easier for the LLP to issue NCDs and get loans, which will help boost the manufacturing activities and startup India, which the government is willing to support and encourage. You can have a non-compete clause if you wish to have it. Then you can have anything about your banking account and audit. You need not have it, but you can have that, which would be the bank's how would be the signatories. If you want to leave it to the partners, you please leave it to the partners. Then accounts, how would it be maintained? Because the LLP Act doesn't define any procedure, it doesn't define any format. In fact, up to now, even the accounting standards are not applicable to the LLP Act by default. So, but now in the company's amendment, they have stated that they may announce certain accounting standards, they may notify certain accounting standards which will be applicable for accounts and audit. As of now, it's nothing. Even for the audit, there is no format, so you can appoint the auditor, who will appoint the auditor, the procedure of appointment of auditor, nothing is given in the LLP Act. You are free to define. Change in the auditor, how will it happen? Removal of auditor, vacancy, everything you can define in the agreement. It is so simple. Then you can put some restrictions of the partners if at all you want to put what they can do, non-compete clause and so on and so forth. Then please define the procedures on how the LLP agreement will be amended. It is important to understand the amendments to the agreement also. Then indemnity clause has to be put in. Indemnity would basically be LLP to the partners, partners to the LLP, and partners to each other. There will be a three-way indemnity clause put into this. Normally, now it depends on how you put it, but it will be a three-way clause. Then winding up procedures, you can put in how it will be wound up. Ultimately, it has to be within the purview of the LLP winding up rules 2012, which are brought in, that it has to go to the NCLT, approval of creditors is required and all that. But you can still define the procedure. How the dispute should be resolved. By default, it says that first schedule says it will go to under the arbitration. But if you want to have it some other way, by jurisdiction of a local court, jurisdiction of a local high court or Supreme Court, whatever you want to say, please put it very clearly. It is very flexible. Nobody can force you. This is the only way of jurisdiction. Now, certain ancillary clauses that can be put in the LLP agreement. In case it is converted from the firm, you have to mention in the agreement that this LLP has been converted from the firm or the company. You will have to mention that fact that this LLP is formed by converting from so and so partnership firm or so and so company. And any other restrictions which you would like to put in, anything you can feel, as I told you, it's a very flexible document. There are no restrictions on it. You can put that. Now the issue arises is the stamp duty. By default, the stamp duty depends on the Stamp Duty Act of every state. So some states have a Stamp Duty Act, like in Maharashtra we have Maharashtra Stamp Duty Act, Gujarat they have Gujarat Stamp Duty Act, and many other states have it. In case there is no Stamp Duty Act to a specific state, then the Indian Stamp Duty Act would apply. Now since we are in Maharashtra, we will look on LLP agreement. The minimum stamp duty is 500 rupees and 500 rupees for every 50,000 rupees of capital additional, subject to a maximum of 15,000 rupees. So a minimum of 500 rupees is the LLP stamp duty agreement and maximum of 15,000. But yes, friends, this maximum would increase in case there is a immovable property coming in. So in case there is a immovable property coming in as a contribution, at that time the tax duty that is payable on the stamp duty that is payable on the transfer of that immovable property would apply. So it can go from 15,000 to based on the immovable property valuation. So that you have to see. If you do not have a immovable property, then it's okay 500 to 15,000. But in case it is there, then you will have to ensure that the stamp duty is paid accordingly. Then on conversion to LLP, normally if you go by logic, it should not be there. But many a times they are insisting, and where are they insisting is where you got immovable property. Normally, otherwise, as I said, this 500 rupees or 15,000 rupees is going. But the problem arises when you have a immovable property to be converted. At that time, you have to discuss and go for adjudication with the stamp duty authorities. Explain to them that we are just converting, we are not getting a new asset, we are just converting and we are just rechristening our name from a private limited company to LLP or a firm to LLP. So please allow us. Many a times they allow you. Otherwise, they may charge you a concessional stamp duty. But it depends on officer to officer and how you are able to convince them. Now we'll just try to understand the difference between a LLP agreement and a memorandum and articles of association. Contents. Memorandum and article, normally you have defined contents. The Companies Act has defined what can be put in, the way how it can be put in. Whereas in a LLP agreement, no content is defined. I told you the basic points, checkpoints which you should ensure that they are there, but that doesn't mean that they have to be there. You have no predefined contents. So it's a very flexible document. You can think of it a legal valid document, anything which is valid. Same, that's what I said, flexibility. In the memorandum and articles, you will not find that flexibility. But here you have a flexibility in the LLP agreement. You can put in based on your requirements. Similarly, restrictions in the LLP, there are no restrictions. Memorandum and article, you again have those restrictions that what can be put, what cannot be put. The format is there. So you have to go into that format. In a LLP, there is no particular format. Stamp duty on a LLP agreement, we have discussed minimum 500 rupees, maximum 15,000 on the duty payable on conveyance. In case of Maharashtra, you will have to look into other states. Whereas in case of a memorandum and article, you have a stamp duty chart which you have to pay accordingly. So many a times, even by stamp duty also, the company can get much costlier than the formation of an LLP. Now we look into some of the income tax aspects of LLP. LLP has to be taxed as a partnership firm under the Income Tax Act. So since it's a partnership firm, partner shares will be exempt from 10(2). The returns have to be signed by the designated partner. So this is one more responsibility that is put on the LLP. Anyhow, the returns are normally signed by the directors also in a company. So it's nothing new, but this is one more responsibility that is put up now by the Income Tax Act. Then in case of a winding up, all the partners shall be jointly and severally liable for tax dues. Friends, please note that is only in case of a winding up. In other cases, they would have a limited liability only. So these are just the sections which I have highlighted. We'll just brief through. Section 223(1) includes LLP within the definition of firm. 23(2) partner. So it says that partner of LLP is nothing but a partner. LLP is treated as a partnership. Section 140 says LLP is to be signed by designated partners. 167. This is all what we discussed earlier. This is just the sections that I have just put it by the sections. And then this is very important that section 44AD explanation A specifically excludes LLP from the definition of eligible assessment. So LLP cannot file a return under 44AD, although a partnership firm can. But this is one exclusion that is given from the definition of the partnership, that for under 44AD, LLP cannot file a return under 44AD. So you cannot go under the provision of 44AD. You have to file a normal return of income showing a balance sheet. Then 115 JC, minimum alternate minimum tax to apply to LLC as is applicable to partnership. And similarly, credit of AMT also is given to JC. Then 45(3), introduction of capital asset by the partner. The rules will apply. 45(4), including the recent rules of withdrawal of money and all, will be applicable to the LLP also, as it is treated as a partnership. 40B, remuneration and interest to the partners, that rule would be applicable. Restrictions are there. Then payments to related parties. What would be the taxation on conversion? If we convert a firm to LLP, there would normally not be any tax, because what the Income Tax Act says is, if all the partners continue to be the partners in the LLP and all the rights and obligations are the same. So if you look at the conversion rule, which will be going into some time, if you convert a firm into LLP, even the LLP Act Schedule 2 mandates that all the partners of the firm have to become partners of the LLP, and all the rights and obligations have to be the same. So by default, if you convert a firm to LLP, if you look into the income tax provision, there will be no tax technically. Well, otherwise, you will not be able to convert a firm to LLP. So if you are able to convert, you come within the purview of this, and there would be no tax. There will be no tax on conversion of company to LLP if the conditions specified under 4713B are specified. 4713B also, friends. Initially, there were 6 conditions. Now they have brought in 7 conditions. One more has been added. Out of that, 3 conditions are such that the moment you convert a company to LLP, 3 are by default fulfilled because the conditions itself in Schedule 3 and 4 of the LLP Act for conversion to LLP are very clear that you have to fulfill those conditions. The only issue is you have to see into the remaining 4, which we will be looking which 3 are covered and which 4 are not. And then 47A4 has been added that in case in any of the year subsequently or currently the 4713B is not complied, then the profits and gains arising from capital transfer of capital gains shall be deemed to be profit and gains of the successor LLP in the year in which the conditions are not complied. And moreover, there will be implications on capital gains for the not only for the company but as well as for the partners or the shareholders because of the valuation increase. So what are the provisions of section 4713B? All the assets and liabilities of the company immediately before conversion become assets and liabilities of LLP. This is a mandated condition even under the LLP Act, so fulfilled. Do not worry about this condition, it will be taken care of. All the shareholders of the company immediately before conversion become the partners and their capital contribution and profit sharing in the LLP are in the same proportion. So this condition is also de facto fulfilled because this is the condition mentioned in your LLP Act also, which states that all shareholders have to become share partners and the capital contribution and profit ratios have to be the same. So you cannot change that. So this condition is again by default fulfilled. The shareholders of the company do not receive any consideration or benefit directly or indirectly in any form other than by of share of profit in capital in LLP. So again, this condition, if you look that all the rights and obligations have to be the same and the shareholders cannot withdraw anything else. This is also given in the LLP Act, so you need not worry about that. This is an important condition that you have to look into. The aggregate of the profit sharing ratio of the shareholders of the company shall not be less than 50% at any time during the period of 5 years from date of conversion. So once you convert, you can bring in other shareholders, but the aggregate ratio of the original shareholders cannot be less than 50%. That you have to take care. So this is one condition. This is the most strict because you have to maintain for 5 years. Otherwise, another condition is there for 3 years. Then this is very one of the toughest conditions, which is creating actually problems in the conversion. That is that sales or turnover or gross receipts in business in any of the 3 previous years should not exceed 60 lakhs. It says any of the 3, it does not speak about average. So supposing 3 years back you had a turnover of 65 lakhs and now you have a turnover of 10 lakhs and 20 lakhs in the last 2 years. Still you will not be able to convert. You will have to wait for 1 more year. I am not saying you will not be able to convert. You will be able to convert, but you will not get the exemption under 4713B. So this is one of the toughest conditions because 60 lakhs is too low a limit. Representations are being made, but still the government has, even in the Act, Amendment Act, we are expecting something. Now, I think the institute is also in the process of writing to the government that since you have made amendments in the LLP Act, make similar amendments to simplify the Income Tax Act also. Let's see how it is. This is the 7th condition that was added subsequently. It was not there in the original 6. Total value of assets of the company as per books in any of the 3 years does not exceed 5 crores. What had happened, friends, was once this act was announced, some major corporations, they converted small holding companies into LLP in a given stroke. So many a times the asset value was much more. To avoid that, the government brought this clause that your asset value should not exceed 5 crores. Otherwise, you would not get the benefit of section 47(13). Then no amount is paid either directly or indirectly to any of the partner out of the balance of accumulated. So for 3 years, you cannot withdraw any of the balance of accumulated profit. That is the reserves that you had in the company, which you are transferring over here. Although they may be transferred to the partner's account, but the partners would actually not be able to withdraw that amount. So what happens on the conversion? Section 32 has been amended that the aggregate depreciation for the year. So supposing you are converting midway and you have claimed half depreciation in the previous company, you will be allowed only 50% depreciation in the remaining period in the LLP and not 100%. So you cannot claim double depreciation. This is just as a clarificatory amendment, you can say, to avoid double deductions. Then just cost of acquisition of the successor LLP shall be the cost of acquisition of the predecessor company, because there is no transfer, it is just the change of name. So they are allowing you the benefit of cost of acquisition. Similarly, cost of acquisition of rights of partners, that is the cost of shares that you have got, will be the cost of acquisition in the LLP. Mind you, all this only if you are able to get that 4930B exemption, otherwise it would not be applicable. Then since 115JB, MAT is not applicable in the LLP, but they have said a negative point that if you have MAT credit pending, you would have to give way to MAT credit also. You will not be eligible to set up that MAT credit in the LLP after conversion. So that would go. You lose the credit for that. 7513 DDA, the provision relating to amortization of expenses, it will be allowed to the successor LLP if at all if there is a conversion. So if something was pending for amortization, the remaining amounts can be amortized in the LLP. So it's just a continuity that they are allowing, that you should not have a loss. Then explanation 1335 AD has been allowed in respect of any capital asset in the predecessor company. So the cost will be taken as this, because if you have already taken the benefit of 35 AD, you cannot say that since I have got a new LLP now, I will again take 35 AD or I will revalue the cost and start claiming depreciation. That is not allowed. Then again, amendment, actual cost of asset at the time of conversion shall be the WDV in the hands of the predecessor. So if you have been claiming depreciation, you can claim further depreciation only on the WDV value, and you cannot start claiming it from the higher amounts actual cost. This is just to avoid double deduction. These clarificatory amendments are issued. And similarly, if you don't fulfill conditions in 4713B, you will not be able to carry forward loss with unabsorbed loss or business loss and unabsorbed depreciation. If you fulfill, yes, you will be able to carry over. And then in any year, that is 3 years or 5 years, if it is not complied, then similarly these losses will be taxable in the year in which those conditions are not complied. Now we will have a brief look at the FDI related provisions relating to an LLP. This is not in the Act, friends. These are the RBI guidelines earlier also, which we discussed taxation. They are in the Income Tax Act, but because we are trying to understand how it can be a useful business model, we are trying to cover every aspect of it. The central government initially had introduced press note number 1 in 2011 series, allowed restricted FDI and LLP. That was the first time when FDI and LLP was allowed. Now after amendments, this is the final position that FDI and LLP is allowed in those sector activities where 100% FDI is allowed through the automatic route. So only if there is a 100% FDI allowed through the automatic route, you can bring in the FDI and LLP. Then there are exceptions to this rule. Sectors eligible to 100% FDI under automatic rule but are subject to FDI linked performance related conditions. So if they are subject to FDI performance linked conditions, then you cannot bring in FDI because it is not directly 100%, although it is 100% FDI under automatic rule, but there are conditions. So that's why in these sectors, you cannot bring in the FDI. Then sectors which are eligible to accept less than 100%. As I said, sectors where only 100% is allowed, you will be able to bring in FDI and LLP. Because there are sectors which give you less than 100%, like banking company and all that. There you may not be able to bring in. Then sectors eligible to apply FDI under government approval rule. In agriculture, plantation activity and print media, no FDI is allowed. Then sectors ineligible to accept FDI, that is any sector which is prohibited under the existing FDI policy. Then who are the eligible investors who can invest in an FDI in the LLP? Who are the investors? A person who is a resident outside India or an entity incorporated outside India shall be eligible to invest for the purpose of FDI. Now here also there are exceptions who cannot. A citizen or an entity of Pakistan and Bangladesh cannot bring in FDI in India. SEBI registered FII cannot bring in. SEBI registered FVCI cannot bring in. SEBI registered QFI cannot bring in. A foreign portfolio investor registered in accordance with SEBI guidelines cannot bring in. So these were the guidelines relating to FDI. Now we look into the conversion part. That is as per the LLP Act. Now we understood what happens on conversion under the income tax, the tax complication. But now we'll try and understand how the conversion is done under the LLP Act. So who can be converted? Either a firm or a private limited company or an unlisted public limited company can be converted to LLP. Second schedule will apply. Second schedule defines the procedure of conversion of firm. Third schedule defines the procedure of conversion of private limited to LLP. And the fourth schedule defines the conversion of unlisted company to LLP. And then after the conversion, LLP is mandated to inform the concerned registering authority. That is in case of a firm to the registrar of firms, in case of a company to the ROC, within 15 days of registration that they are now converted, please delete our old name. The second schedule, what it says is all the partners of the firm have to be partners of LLP. Now the first thing that you have to note is only a registered partnership firm can be converted. Point number 2 to be noted is all the partners. So what happens is if some of the partners do not wish to be converted, you will have to ask them to either retire earlier and then get the retirement deed registered. It will take time. The other solution is ask them to convert, and after conversion immediately they can retire, no problem. So that is one part that they can look into. Form 17 no longer required in the new form. LLP to inform registrar of firms about conversion within 15 days that I have converted, please delete our name. Then all assets, liabilities and rights and obligations to be transferred, that we discussed in the income tax provisions, that this is a default rule that you need, so it is already fulfilled. Then you have to mention the statement of conversion in all the correspondence of LLP for 12 months. In the next 12 months, you have to mention the statement of conversion that the LLP has been converted from firm. All your correspondence would include your envelopes, letterhead, emails, WhatsApp chat, everything, wherever you are giving a reference. Then all your pending proceedings against the firm will continue against the LLP as if they have never changed. So by default, they will continue. Partners will continue to be liable unlimited for liabilities which they happen before the conversion, because their liabilities convert to limited liability only on the date of conversion. So they cannot take the recuse that we are in now partners in LLP and our liability is limited. If the act was committed prior to the conversion, so the liability occurred prior to that, at that time, it will be happening. All the existing agreements and contracts to continue as if of the LLP. You only have to issue a corrigendum or addendum stating that the name is changed, the remaining all the terms conditions remain the same. Now I have merged both Schedule 3 and Schedule 4, conversion of private limited company and unlisted public company, because they are practically the same except for the name of the company. So all the shareholders of the company have to become the partners of the LLP, which we also seen in the income tax. No security interest should be there in the existing assets. So in case you have some mortgage and all that, you will have to speak to the banker that you you give some arrangement has to be made, because then you can have a subsequent mortgage in a LLP, which is allowed. Form 18 is off. In LLP to inform the ROC about conversion within 15 days. Again, this is a dichotomy that ROC is mandated that once a company is converted, because it's the same authority which is converting a company to accepting an incorporation of a LLP from conversion, they are mandated to delete the name of the company which is converted. But still, the onus is on the designated partners and the LLP to inform the ROC that we are converted, please delete everything. I don't know why is it required, but this is one provision which is there in the statute. Then all assets, liabilities, rights and obligations to be transferred. Statement of conversion as in case of a firm, we have to mention here also. All the existing agreements and contracts to continue, all pending procedures to be continued. Now we look into the last aspects, accounts, audit and filings. Accounts have to be maintained. Format, there is no format. Statement of accounts and solvency is to be filed within 1 month from the end of 6 months of the end of financial year. That is, a financial year is ending 31st March, 6 months ending 30th September. So you have to file this statement of accounts and solvency form number 8 up to 30th of October. Mind you, friends, if you delay, the fee, late fee is 100 rupees per day, apart from the fines and penalties that are there. Still, minimum 100 rupees additional fee per day is there. Now they have brought in an amendment that in case of small companies, the per day fees will be reduced to 50 rupees. But the rest is there. This is the only amendment that is benefiting as of now relating to small companies. Audit will be mandatory in case turnover exceeds 40 lakhs or contribution exceeds 25 lakhs. This clause has not been amended in the 21 Amendment Act also. So audit will be mandatory only if the turnover exceeds 40 lakhs. But mind you, friends, there is no audit procedure defined. There are no audit reports. But yes, the Act says, the Amendment Act 21 says that the government may notify auditing standards. So we may find certain reports coming in. As of now, there is no format of account. There is no schedule 2 for account. There is no audit format. There is no CARO, nothing applicable. But as auditors, we have to ensure that SA 700 is followed. SA 700 divide is followed while we issue the audit report, and accounting standards are followed, at least the mandatory ones, because as chartered accountants we are bound to see in case the audit is done that the accounting standards are also followed, although they have not yet been notified. Audit has to be conducted by a chartered accountant, and then you also have to file an annual return to be filed within 16 days of the end of financial year, which is 30th of May, form number 11. These are the only two documents that you have to file, form number 11 up to 30th May and form number 8 up to 30th of October. Please note these dates. If you remember these dates, nothing else is to be filed in case of LLP. Very simple. Annual return has to be certified by a company secretary if that capital exceeds 25 lakhs only, otherwise no. Now we'll just see the accounts and audit procedures comparison between LLP and company. As I told you, statutory requirement, every company irrespective of the turnover has to get audited. Now the government is thinking on the lines of LLP to exempt smaller companies from getting audited, but as of now, every company has to get audited. But LLP only if the turnover exceeds 40 lakhs or the capital does not exceed 25 lakhs have to be audited, otherwise no. Then Companies Act has defined the standards, notified the standards to be applicable, whereas the LLP Act has just in the definition they have put that the government may notify. Section 34A has been introduced. LLP Act stating that the government may notify standards in the future. As of now, there are no standards applicable. But yes, as chartered accountants, if we are conducting audit, we have to ensure that the standards, mandatory standards at least, are made applicable. Then companies, we have a CARO report and all that. Earlier we had MAU CARO. Then we are also bound by SA 700 device to look into that. There is no such format for the LLP, but still as chartered accountants, we are bound, members of the institute, we are bound to follow the statements of audit as well as SA 700 revise while we issue a audit report. Statutory audit, as I said, is compulsory only if your turnover exceeds 25 lakhs. Now, statutory filings. For a LLP, there are only two filings. I repeat, form number 8 up to 30th of October, form number 11, annual return up to 30th of May. In the company, you have lot many filings, AOC, XBRL, depending on the size of company and all that. Nothing, not many procedures. You have to file the balance sheet, P&L. Nothing has to be filed. Only these forms are to be filled. Simple as that. Then for directors, designated partners, if you have a change in designated partners, you have to fill in form number 4 along with their appointment or resignation letters and consent. Director also the form has defined, so you have to fill. There is not much change. For other stakeholders also, if there is a change in the shareholding pattern and all. Annual return goes for the company. Here in form number 11, there is a change in the partners. You have to file in form number 11. So some residuary clauses, mergers and acquisitions. Section 61, 62 deals with the mergers and acquisitions. They are practically similar to the provisions under the Companies Act. Winding up and dissolution. Winding up proceedings are guided by the LLP Winding Up Rules 2012. And earlier it used to be winding up procedures laid under Section 441 onwards of the Companies Act 1956 are made applicable. But now the winding up proceedings are guided by the LLP Winding Rules 2012, which you have to look into the NCLT and creditors. The procedures have been defined. So friends, this was basically about LLP as a business model. This is just one small presentation which I have made from my experience, which is not given in any book or this thing, but I have made it to make it simple what type of documentation that you have to maintain and keep it when you are working for an LLP or giving service to an LLP or maintaining documentation. So what is the documentation that should be maintained in the categorization? I have categorized it into master data, statutory records, ancillary records, and recurring records. 4 criteria I have categorized this. Mind you, friends, you will not find it in any of the records. Nowhere it is written. This is just based on my experience, a simplified version I am giving so that it becomes easier for you to support your client. So what type of master records are required? Form number 16, certificate of incorporation, LLP agreement, that has to be the master document. Supplementary agreements as and when you do it. List of partners and consent of partners. Consent of partners has to be obtained. List of designated partners and their consents. Mind you, friends, if you don't get the consent of partners or their designated partners, you have a penalty to pay. So you have to obtain these documents. They are important documents. Similarly, resignations of partners or resignations of designated partners. Then any resolution amending the LLP agreement, including admission, retirement, change of object, etc. Only important amendments you can keep as a master record, because they are sort of permanent amendments. Resolution based on which you have a supplementary agreement. Then statutory records are statutory registrations, your PAN, TAN, GST, IC, PF, ET, etc. Your minute books, although there is no format given, but at least for approval of accounts, you will have to call at least one meeting in the year for the partner. Maybe for every other thing that you need, you may have to call meeting. So you have to maintain the minute books. You have to define the procedure, but you have to maintain the minute books. Then copies of important resolutions that you pass. Copies of your returns, including ROC, income tax and others as applicable, that is your GST return, provision tax, PF and all, if at all they are applicable. Please keep copies over there in the statutory records and any other statutory submissions that you will be doing. The ancillary records will be all your agreements and contracts with your employees, with your vendors, with your customers, and so on and so forth. They have to be there. Ownership records of properties, your conveyance agreements and all that. Auditors and company secretary appointment, if any. Now, as I said, there is no procedure, but at least you will have to appoint and get a no objection and all. So appointment and acceptance has to be obtained. So please keep those on the ancillary records. Audited financial statements over a period, if at all they are audited, otherwise unaudited financial statements. Then audit reports from statutory auditors or tax auditors like your GST, excise, VAT, and so on and so forth as an applicable. Details of your bank accounts and authorized signatories. Policies and operations manual, if at all you have in the company, you can keep it there. And lastly, the recurring records, which are the day-to-day records which we keep. Books of accounts, fixed asset register if applicable, in your labor records, PF register, salary register, etc. And the meetings. Issue proper notice. Now, what will be the notice? What will be a procedure? You have to define in your agreement. It is not given, but it's always better that you issue a proper notice. It will help you because there have been cases which have come to us where the agreement is silent and then disputes have arisen of the meetings being properly convened, minutes being properly recorded, and then those disputes go to court, which we are facing the issues. So that's why I thought it proper to highlight this issue over here. Maintain proper minutes, please. Maintain attendance records, who all are attending, whether it was through video conferencing and all that. If it is through video conferencing, try and maintain photographs so it will help you. And your statutory obligations, ROC returns, as I told you, annual return form 11 and statement of solvency form number 8, 30th May and 30th October. Please take note. Income tax returns have to be filed. GST and allied laws return. These are your statutory obligations for LLP. Friends, this is what basically is relating to LLP. We'll take up the question and answer later. I would now like to go to the amendments. We will just rush through in half an hour. Because as I told you, there are hardly 50 amendments. Girish bhai, this is clear, this screen?
Yes, bhai.
Yeah.
Clear.
So legislative history, as I told you in the beginning, LLP Act and the rules were there in 8 and 9. Then if you see all these amendment rules have come, that is basically giving forms, amending the forms and so on, winding up dissolution rules 2010 came. Then you have dissolution rules 2012, and basically all these amendments came up, giving you changes in the forms, giving new forms and all that. 2017 amendment came to give a settlement, that is a closure form number 24, where you can wind up a LLP without going through the LLP winding rules. You can just write off all your assets and liabilities and you can close your LLP. Closure of LLP you can do through the rule 17 form number 24. And then this was the first major amendment that has come after 12 years, you can say 13 years, that LLP Amendment Act 2021 has come. What are the salient features there? Concept of a small company introduced. We'll look into brief later. Non-convertible debentures, as we discussed, they have allowed. Applicability of accounting and auditing standards. Special courts have been created to look into the LLP related matters. Jurisdiction of tribunals and appellate tribunals have been redefined. Certain offences decriminalized. Punishments for frauds has been enhanced from 2 years to 5 years. That is very significant. Then they have allowed the created procedures for compounding of offences, adjudication of penalties which were not there earlier. Then there were some provisions relating to identical or undesired names. Like supposing you form an LLP with the name of Reliance. So definitely it's an identical name in which Reliance can definitely object. And Reliance and the group, if they object, then there are certain procedures were there. They have simplified actually now, you can say, which are harsher provisions. So what is about the small LLP, the provision? They have introduced the section 2TA definition of a small LLP. It says where the contribution does not exceed 25 lakhs or such higher amount exceeding 5 crores. So they may prescribe, as of now, a small company is a small company where the contribution does not exceed 25 lakhs, but it may be exceeded up to 5 crore rupees, but it depends on the notification which may be notified by the government. Or the other condition is the turnover which does not exceed 40 lakhs as of now, or the higher amount which may go up to 50 crores. So if you are, so this is what the government has taken the power in their hands. Next time onwards, they would not be coming into the parliament to amend, they would just be notifying the rules. And it also should fulfill such other requirements as may be prescribed from time to time by the government. Then non-convertible debentures, as I told you friends, 2IA definition has been introduced. Debenture means a non-convertible debenture issued by a limited liability partnership evidencing a debt and constituting a charge on the assets. This is only given, nothing else is given, but the government has taken the power. They will still make rules relating to issue of debentures, how the debentures will be issued, maintaining the records of debentures, how the records of those debentures will be maintained, manner of creating debenture redemption reserve, information, documents, and return of allotment to be filed. So, friends, as of now, the government has just defined what is a non-convertible debenture. We cannot issue debentures till we get all these rules. So, in the near future, we can expect some rules to be notified relating to the issue of debentures, maintaining how the records of the debentures have to be maintained with us, manner of creating the debenture redemption reserve, and information and documents and return of allotment which may need to be filed with the registrar subsequently. So we let us wait for the rules. Similarly, for the small company, as I told you, they have just got in a definition. They are not given any benefits as of now. They may come out with the procedures. They may come out with a notification what benefits the small companies will have. Except for one benefit that they have given is that the fines have been reduced to 50%. That is all. There is no other benefit as of now, as per the Amendment Act. We are expecting rules which may come down, and we will have detailed procedures coming. Then 34A, as I told you, has been introduced that central government may, in consultation with NAFRA, constituted under 132 of the Companies Act, prescribe the accounting standards and prescribe the standard of auditing as recommended by ICAI, constituted under Section 3 of Act, for a class or class of limited liability partnership. So they may prescribe the standards of accounting or auditing, or they may notify the existing ones to be applicable, and they may be applicable to all, or maybe a class or classes. Now, because earlier there were no class or classes of limited liability partnership, but now they are creating class of classes that are small company. We don't know how many other classes will be coming, medium company, a large company, large LLP, medium LLP, small LLP. Now only they have created a class called as small LLP, and one more thing called as a startup LLP, which we look into in some time. Then what they have done is they have created special codes. Up to now, the codes under Section 435 of the Companies Act were treated as special courts, or the normal courts of jurisdiction used to handle the matters relating to LLP. Now what they have said, to fast track the matters for handling offences relating to LLP, only special courts will be notified, which will be dealing. So 67A has been added, saying that establishment of special courts. 67B defines the procedure and powers of the special court. And 67C defines the appeals and revision related procedures of a special court. And then what would be the jurisdiction of courts? It was there, 77 was there, it has just been amended to incorporate all the changes of 67A, B, and C to expand the jurisdiction of the special courts, to define the jurisdiction of the special courts. Because earlier it was the jurisdiction of the normal courts, but now since the special courts are being established, so they have amended the definition 77 as jurisdiction of court. And then they also have introduced a new section 77A, cognizance of offences. So we'll look into each of them. Central government may designate number of courts as may be required. The special court will consist of a single judge. He can be either a session judge or an additional session judge, in case the offences are punishable with the act with the imprisonment of 3 years or more. Friends, if you look through all the 84 sections of the act currently, there is only one punishment which is of 5 years, that is more than 3 years, that is section 32 for fraud. All the other offences are imprisonment of 2 years or less. So only cases of section 32, that is fraud, will be going to the session judge or additional judge. Other cases will be going to a metropolitan magistrate or a judicial magistrate of the first class, because they are entitled to look into all the other offences. So if there are major offences, there is only one major offence defined of 3 years or more under the LLP Act, that is section 32 fraud. The rest all are 2 years or less, so no issue on that. Then all these judges will be appointed with the concurrence of the concerned Chief Justice of the concerned High Court. Means in where jurisdiction they want to establish a special court, Your special courts, as they say, the number of courts can be notified. So it can be notified in different jurisdictions. So the jurisdiction of a specific high court, the chief justice of the high court will be consulted to appoint that the special court. Then till the time these judges are appointed, these special courts are appointed, courts designated under section 435 of Companies Act will be deemed to be special courts. So now, as of now, you can say that all the special courts appointed under section 435 of the Companies Act have been notified as special courts under LLP Act till some other special courts are being defined or established by the central government. Then what would be the procedures and powers? All the offences under LLP Act, which earlier were tried by other courts, will be tried by special courts only. Now you see they have defined both. Section 32, that is above 3 years, they go to session judge or additional session judge, and other offences go to a judicial magistrate or a metropolitan magistrate. Then courts are authorized to try additional offences under any act which are not under this act, but they are connected. Like supposing you have an offense of fraud, with that you can have a charge of 420 under IPC, then you can have an enforcement directorate case, and you can have a charge of CBI for criminal forgery, which are all connected for the same offense. So they all will be tried by the special courts only. No, they will not go to different courts. This was done to merge everything to save time, because what normally happens is the offender, they take advantage. Sir, my hearing is pending in this case, so please let that judgment come. So it used to delay the justice. To avoid that, they have said that everything will be merged and tried by only one special court under the LLP Act. Then, if the punishment is less than 3 years, the court may try an offence summarily. Summarily means normally witnesses are not called. The judge looks into the submissions of the prosecution, looks into the submissions of the defense, and based on the judgment it may give. So a summary this thing. So normally, as I said, all the offences which are normally tried by the metropolitan court or the judicial officer, they can be tried summarily because they are all punishable less than 3 years. And in case of a summary trial, no sentence of imprisonment more than 1 year can be given. So normally, if you see under the LLP Act, all the punishments that have been given is up to 2 years. So it is up to 2 years, so it can be less. So once the judge says that yes, I find it to be a summary trial, so that it becomes faster, then he cannot give a sentence of more than 1 year. Then the maximum sentence, if it is converted to a summary trial, the maximum sentence will be restricted to 1 year. Then during the summary trial, while seeing the documents, if the judge feels that I have wrongly taken a summary trial judgment and I would like to go to the normal trial, because that punishment of 1 year is too less to be given. It is to be given 2 years and all that. So he can record an order recalling the summary trial, and then he can proceed legally. So he can recall that order and again go back to the normal proceedings. Appeals and revisions. High Court shall be the appellate authority in all these cases. Then we saw the jurisdictions. Special courts have jurisdiction power to impose punishment under section 30. All the matters pending till date in various courts will have to be transferred to special courts. Now, as of now, as I told you, all special courts notified under 435 of the Companies Act have been notified as special courts under LLP Act. So all the current cases which are pending will have to be by default transferred to the special courts. Now, what are the cognizance of offences? All the offences can be taken cognizance by special court only. And now, only if the registrar feels that this is such an offence that it should be taken up by some other court and it should not be taken up by the special court. As I told you, all related offences also will be taken care by the special court. So if the registrar feels that it is some say it involves some sedition or something, and it has to be tried by, say, an example, NIA court. So he can file an application to the special court, and then on a case-to-case basis, those cases can be transferred. Otherwise, technically, all the offences have to be taken cognizance by the special courts only. Then jurisdiction of tribunals and appellate tribunals. Section 72 has been amended. It was there. Tribunal to exercise all powers under the Act. Appeal against the tribunal order is to be made to appellate tribunal within 60 days of the receipt of the order. And if the parties, normally at the time of tribunal, you have a mutual settlement. And if the parties consent that, okay, we are going for a mutual settlement, we will not appeal, then there will be no appeal with the consent of the parties. So if the parties mutually agree, then there will be no appeal. Then appellant tribunal on being satisfied may condone the delay by 60 days. So if the appeal is not filed within 60 days, it can be filed in another 60 days and the condonation may be sought. But the highlight and the important point here is the condonation can be sought only up to 60 days. And why has this been got? Because we have seen, especially from the government side, when appeals are being filed, they file 3 years later, 4 years later. We have seen in income tax and all that. And then they start seeking condonation, sir, this is the reason we could not. So the government, normally this happens on the government side and they take a disadvantage. So that's why they have said that if the government has to go, they have to go maximum 120 days, that the 60 days is within the original period and maximum 60 days of condonation. Then before passing an order, the appellate tribunal has to give an opportunity to be heard to both the sides. Copies of the parties to be given to the parties and the tribunal both. Now certain offences decriminalized. 22 penal provisions have been made, 7 have been removed. There were 29 penal provisions earlier. 7 have been removed, now only 22 remain. There are 7 compoundable offences and 3 non-compoundable offences, and 3 penalties have been omitted. This chart I can share later. I have it in a separate chart. Because of paucity of time, I am not going into this. Now, the most highlight is punishment of frauds. As I said, section 32 has been amended. Earlier, the punishment of fraud was 2 years and it has been increased to 5 years. This is the only punishment that has been increased beyond 3 years to 5 years. All the other punishments are up to 2 years. I don't know why in section 67A they have stated that punishments of 3 years or above or 3 years or less. There is only one punishment above 3 years and all the others are up to 2 years. There is no punishment of 3 years, any other punishment. But still, that is the law. The penalty will remain the same, that is 50,000 rupees minimum, going to a maximum of 5 lakh rupees. Apart from the punishment penalty under section 31, wherein the defrauding partner will have to face all the other consequences criminally, and then the defaulting partner may also, not only the defaulting partner but also the employee who has defrauded under section 33 will also be liable to pay damages over and above making good the losses of the other party. Then we have compounding of offences, section 39. Regional director or an officer of not less than the regional director to be authorized. Earlier there was no such rank, so now they are creating an officer of regional director for this purpose. Then the compounding can be done an amount equal to the maximum fine but not less than to the minimum fine. So minimum fine, that is the minimum or maximum fine that is prescribed. That is the compounding that you may have to face. No compounding allowed within 3 years. So compounding can be done only once in 3 years. Once you are done, only after the next 3 years you will be able to apply for compounding. As of now, compounding can be done once in 3 years. In case of compounding done before initiation of prosecution, no prosecution. So this is the advantage, that in case you feel that there is a prosecution in that penalty also, you better go for compounding. And in case no prosecution is initiated, no prosecution will be initiated if you go for a compounding. And in case a prosecution is initiated, then the registrar has to apply to the court to discharge the offender once they accept the compounding. They accept the compounding, the registrar has to apply to the court to withdraw the case and discharge that, okay, we are not proceeding for prosecution. So technically it gives you a waiver from prosecution if you are going for compounding. In case compounding charge is not paid, the original fine will be double. If you are going for compounding and you are not able to pay the compounding charges, then the original case will be reinstated and the fine will be double than what is normally charged. So please take care, if you are going for compounding, please pay the compounding charges. Then they have brought in a section for 76A for adjudication of penalties. Central government may authorize officers not below the rank of registrar. Adjudicating officer may So penalties which they have introduced in the Amendment Act may not be automatic, but they have to be levied based on the notice is to be issued by the adjudicating officer. Then penalty for small or startup LLP, as I told you, to be 50%, subject to 1 lakh rupees maximum of for LLP and 50,000 rupees maximum for partner or the designated partner concerned. But this is the only benefit as of now that is given to small or startup LLPs. The registrar or the adjudicating officer has to give you an opportunity of explaining your case why penalty should not be levied, so it is not automatic. Then order is appealable before the regional director within 60 days of the receipt of the order. In case compounding charges are now, as I was discussing the identical or undesired names, there can be a chance that you form an LLP with the name Reliance or Tata, and nowadays objections are being raised by this Reliance Group and Tata Group that our name is being used. So they can apply to the government. Section 17 has been amended because earlier defined in section 17 and 18, section 17 and 18 have been merged and section 18 has been deleted. So identical, what is the definition of identical has been changed. Identical or to resembles that of other limited liability partnership or a company. So it is identical to a proprietor or partnership, it will not matter. Only if it is identical to any other limited liability partnership or a company or a registered trademark of a proprietor under the trademark. So if a proprietor has a registered trademark, then also you cannot have a LLP registered under that name. Then on an application by such company or proprietor or LLP, central government may issue directions to change the name. Application from proprietor can be made within 3 years from the knowing. So you cannot go beyond. Supposing the proprietor comes to know that somebody has misused my name, within 3 years he has to apply. Then the LLP has to obtain the name within 3 months of the date of directions and intimate the registrar. In case the default by the LLP, central government shall allot a new name. Earlier, in case of a default, the LLP used to be wound up, the name used to be deleted, and the LLP and the partners used to be made to pay penalty and fine, which is now removed. Earlier, there was fine, which has now been deleted, and moreover, the government will just change the name. Earlier, the LLP itself was wound up, so that's what I said. They have made it simpler. The earlier procedures were a bit rough and tough, harsher. And these are the miscellaneous provisions relating to the amendments. All references to Companies Act 56 have been replaced with relevant sections in 23 2013 Act, that is section 2C, 2D, 2U and 76. Because earlier when the LLP Act was formed, there was Companies Act 56, and after that this is the first major amendment. So this is a consequential amendment, you can say. Then section 1873 and 81 has been deleted. 18 I told you for merger. 73 is for default of submitting order of tribunal to the registrar. There was a penalty that has been deleted. And section 81, because it was a new act, there were some transitional provisions. Since they are no longer required, it has been deleted. So that's what I told you. There were 81 sections. 3 has been deleted, and 6 has been introduced. So there are now 84 sections. Central government has taken further powers in their hands in section 80 to issue or make provisions in case of this amendment act. There may be certain provisions which may not be easily compliable, so the government may issue directions by way of notification to amend this act or give clarification. So they have taken that power. Then, as I said, differential fees may be prescribed. As of now, there are no differential fees prescribed, but differential fees or additional fees may be prescribed for different classes of limited liability partnerships or for different documents or returns to be filed under this. As of now, nothing is given, but notification will be coming. We have to wait for the rules. So there may be differential fees for small LLPs, startup LLPs, and so on and so forth, or different documents or returns to be filed depending on the gravity of the importance of the document. Then this is one important highlight that we have to look, which normally has not been reported in any of the amendments that has been reported. Central government assumes the power to open new registration offices of registration of LLP, appointing registrars and all these officers. Now what the central government is planning is separation of powers of registrars for companies and LLP. This is a welcome decision because normally what is happening is when you apply some documents to ROC, companies are given priority and LLP documents are getting approvals after quite some time. So this is what the government is planning. So now we may have registrars separately for companies and registrars separately for LLPs. Let's see how it goes about. But this is one welcome amendment by way of introduction of section 68A the government has entered. Let us see how it proceeds. And then for the purpose of amalgamation, 62 has been amended. Definition of property has been defined to include property, rights and power of every description and liabilities. And the LLP shall not be amalgamated with a company. It is very clear that a LLP can be amalgamated only with a LLP and not with a company. They have just clarified. This is by way of explanation to section 62. Then, as I told you earlier, the definition of resident in India has been amended to mean a person who was in the financial year, he has not stayed for a period of less than 120 days during the financial year. Earlier, it was a period of less than 182 days in the preceding year. So this is amended by explanation to section 7.1. Then definition of business has been amended in section 2E to exclude any activity which the government may by notification exclude. So earlier business was a wider definition. So now the government wishes to exclude. So maybe certain businesses may not be eligible to open LLPs. Then startup LLP, which we had discussed earlier, means a LLP incorporated under this act and recognized in accordance with the notification from time to time. Explanation to 76A3 has been inserted to say that government may issue notification defining what is a startup LLP and what are the benefits to be given. These are the social friends. Thank you very much. This is all the presentation. Now I am open for questions. Girish bhai, it's all okay.
On chat, there is no question, but one question is from my side. Vijay, when there is a audit is applicable under LLP Act and also applicable under Income Tax Act,
Yeah.
then which form we should fill, 3CA or 3CB?
3CB.
Because in audit is under LLP Act is also applicable and income tax is also applicable.
If it is there, then you issue 3CA. It depends. If it depends, see, if it is not mandatory under LLP Act, then 3CB will go. Otherwise, 3CA will.
Okay, that is what my question. If it is mandatory under LLP Act also, then we should file 3CA, na?
Yes.
3CB.
Yes.
Because last year my friend has filed 3CB. There was an issue.
No, there is no issue because if you see 3CA, it says that I have conducted the audit under so and so act.
Okay. So when there is an audit under any other act, we should use 3CA.
Audit under, but it should be mandatory. You cannot say that just because I have conducted an audit of turnover of less than 40 lakhs.
Okay. It should be mandatory audit.
Yes.
So thank you. There is no other question, Vijay. So coming to the vote of thanks part. Thank you, Vijay ji, for guiding us on LLP Act right from the incorporation made in 2008 to the recent amendments. I am sure that the detailed deliberation which you did today will help us to guide our LLP clients and their compliance related to LLP Act. Thank you, Vijay, and thank you all for attending the sessions. Now we are stopping recording.
Yeah.